If you looked in your bulletin, the title of today's sermon is Judas the Bad Guy? Question mark. You don't have to look in your bulletin. I know I normally don't. But that title can be a little misleading at first look, so I just want to be clear and say that I'm not going to say that anything Judas did was right. I fully believe that Satan had entered into Judas, that Judas had sinned. He had sinned greater than Pontius Pilate, and that he is a son of perdition. I fully believe that, and I adhere to the scripture on that. What I want to do today is I want to paint maybe a different picture of Judas than what we already have. The Church of St. John the Baptist has a stained glass mural of Judas, and behind Judas is a black halo. Normally the halo is gold in its holiness and godliness. Giving a man a black halo is the opposite of that. Whatever it is to be holy, whatever it is to be godly, Judas is not. In the fictional work Dante's Inferno, Judas is in the very center of the deepest circle of hell. We love to hate Judas, and we love to condemn him. And it was interesting. I was praying, and this idea was given to me, and I was praying, and I was saying, Lord, how do I glorify you by talking about the one that betrayed you? And the answer was quite clearly, let them see Judas as I see Judas. So I'm going to attempt to do that. But first, a story. Last summer, I had the opportunity to be able to serve in Australia for a couple weeks, do some ministry there. And during that time, we went to a church in the town I was staying in, and I was approached by an Aborigine woman after the service. She dressed normal, she spoke English. It was just Aborigine to them is Native American to us. And she more cornered me after the service and started to tell me about the 4th of July, an American holiday, being told to an American from somebody that's never seen America. And I let her do it. I let her talk, and it was the most awkward conversation I've ever had, was with this woman. And she's telling me about the 4th of July and everything about it, and her accent's very hard to follow. But she's telling me about this, and then she goes on to talking about a stream of Google searches that she did about the 4th of July. I don't know, but she felt the need to tell me. And she was going through, and she told me that she Googled an article from CNN, and it was about how on the 4th of July, Caitlyn Jenner tweeted that she was happy to live in a country where she was free to be herself. And this sermon isn't anything about Caitlyn Jenner. This is just the conversation. And the woman, she said that. She told me this is what she tweeted, and then immediately followed up with, well, she's going to hell. And then carried on the conversation like nothing happened. And I was taken back. I mean, just one sentence about this person, and then she's going to hell, and then moving on. Like it was casual, it was no big deal, common knowledge. And I was taken back, but at the same time, looking back on it, what she did was she only said what far too many people already think. Well, we are so quick to condemn, and to say that a person is going to hell is something so light, something so easy to say. And I want to challenge that. I want to challenge that willingness to just condemn people. And I want to do that with the person we condemn the most, Judas Iscariot. But to talk about Judas, to let us see Judas the way Jesus saw Judas, we have to go back to Rome and the Roman culture. Now, Israel was under Roman occupation. Israel's culture, the Jewish culture, was becoming more Roman, more Greek at the time. Their religion was too, but they managed to fight for some religious freedoms. And their kingship, especially, their kingship was changed because of the Romans. Sure, they still had a king, but it would be like if America got a prime minister. The office was different. It wasn't theirs. Whatever it was to have a Jewish king was taken from them, and it was now a Roman definition of a king. And then in this more Roman Israel comes Jesus, the other one. A lot of J's in the Bible. But Jesus comes into the scene. And we look back at Jesus and we know he's the Messiah. And we know Messiah, that he comes, he lives a sinless life, he dies the death on the cross, and he comes back, ascends, forgiveness of sins, life everlasting, the whole shebang. We look at that, looking back at it. And the culture that Jesus was coming into, when you said Messiah, when you said God's anointed, you were not thinking of one who was going to come, die on the cross, and be resurrected, the divine Son of God. You did not think about that. The word Messiah was actually used in the Old Testament. Jesus wasn't unique in having the title Messiah. He was unique in having the title the Messiah. Messiah just meant God's anointed. Melchizedek was a Messiah. Elijah was a Messiah. David was a Messiah. And those three offices at the time, that you could be a Messiah in. You could be a prophet, priest, and king. And those were God's anointed. And in the Roman culture that Jesus is working in, the Jewish culture that Jesus is in, they understood whenever there was the whisper of the word the Messiah in the synagogues, they were thinking of the one who was going to be the prophet, the priest, and the king. Before, it was just one. There was an understanding there was one coming who was going to be all three. And in this culture, prophets are cool. I mean, prophets are always cool. And Jesus is clearly filling that out. He's prophesying the miracles. It is so similar to Elisha that it's evident that Jesus is acting as a prophet. And then the priesthood was something that was already covered in the time. Not the best, it wasn't the best priesthood in Jewish history, but it certainly wasn't the worst. But the thing that people were really longing for, the thing that when you said the Messiah that gave them goosebumps, was the idea of the king. The king coming, who would kick out the Romans and make Israel God's holy kingdom again. Light of the world, salt of the earth. Bring them back to the glory that they once had. That was the thing that gave them goosebumps, and that was what they were waiting for. And it's in that messianic expectation that the king is going to come. Jesus comes. So when Peter says, you are the Messiah, he's saying that you are the prophet, the priest, and the king. The one who's going to give us the throne back and make us really proud to be Jews. And that understanding of the Messiah is the same understanding that Judas would have had. Same as Peter, same as the other 12, same as the people Jesus was preaching to. When you said Messiah, everybody, prophet, priest, king, that was the understanding. Judas was no exception. But what do we know about Judas? Not a lot. Not a lot. We know he took money from the offering, or from the collective fund that Jesus would have used. But we don't condemn a man to the deepest, innermost circle of hell, and we don't give a man a black halo just because he takes some money from the offering. No. It takes something more than that to condemn a man. And just if we are going to condemn Judas so heavily on the money, then we are doing Judas an injustice. But other than that, what do we know about Judas? We know Judas was one of the 12 apostles. We know he was at least trusted with the money over Matthew, who was a tax collector who would have handled money. We know Mark chapter 6, Jesus sends the 12 apostles out to preach, to do what Jesus does, to spread the kingdom, to heal, miracles, exorcisms, all of it, the whole shebang. He sends out the 12 and pairs of 2. And we like to think, and thinking of the disciples and the apostles, that Jesus is with the 11 and then Judas is over in the corner counting the money. When in reality, Judas was just as much a disciple as any of the other 12. When Jesus says, go and spread the kingdom out, Judas went with another apostle. He could have gone with Peter for all we know. And both of them operating with 3 years of experience with Jesus and with the same understanding of who Jesus is. They understood that he was supposed to be prophet and priest, but he was going to be king. And you see it, they argue about it, the apostles, who's going to sit at your right hand in the kingdom. It comes up. If you read, it's there. And with this expectation of the king coming comes the triumphal entry. This is a parade. Roman culture, a parade is the coming of a king, a conqueror. And not only that, but the triumphal entry is the one where he rides in on the donkey's colt. And I should have bookmarked this because that would have been really prepared. And it'd be a smooth transition. But Jesus says, go fetch me a donkey's colt. I'm going to ride into town. And Jesus has been to Jerusalem before. Why is this one that they throw him a parade? Why is this one where they have the palm leaves? Why is this one so special? Because Jesus says, go fetch me a donkey's colt. As John chapter 12, he makes mention, and Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, just as it is written, fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt. When Jesus says, go fetch me a donkey's colt, what he's saying is, that expectation everybody has of me being king, go get me a donkey's colt, because it's happening, and it's happening now. He's saying, I'm claiming the title as king, and in everybody's mind, that means that Jesus is going to ride on a donkey's colt straight into Jerusalem. He's going to bring in the legion of angels, he's going to kick out the Romans, and he's going to make Israel great again. But, a little hindsight, that's not exactly what happens. But in the triumphal entry, the people, they even welcome him. And Luke 19:38, they come and they say, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest. That's the triumphal entry. They're saying, the people are recognizing, this is the King. This is the Messiah. This is the one we have been waiting for. This is the one that will make us great. Judas is no exception. He's no exception. He has the same understanding. Jesus is coming. He's going to be king, and he's going to make our land great. But then triumphal entry happens, and Jesus doesn't take the throne. They've been following the guy for 3 years. Jesus says, I'm going to be king now. And he doesn't do anything. And everybody's left scratching their head, like, Jesus, you said, I'm going to be king now. We hailed you as king, and now you're not doing a thing. Just life as usual? So then, this is the point where the scriptures say Satan entered Judas. This is the point where Judas starts thinking, and he's saying, well, Jesus is supposed to be king. It's prophesied he's going to be king. I know he's the Messiah, but he's not doing it. I wonder if there's any way that I can make God's plan happen faster. I wonder if there's any way that I can get what I know God has in plan on my own time. A sin, an understanding, and a thought that I'm sure many of us have all thought. What can I do to get the things God has planned on my time, my way? So he starts thinking, and then the scribes and the chief priests and Pharisees have a bounty on Jesus' head. Judas approaches them, and he says, how much would you give me? It's not about the money for him. They offer the guy what would be $200 today. He's selling out what he knows to be the Messiah, the prophet, the priest, the king, like $200. It's not about the money. If it was about the money, he'd get more. For Judas, the $200 is just a bonus. Because in his mind, I turn in Jesus, I get a little bit of money out of it, and then Jesus is going to be put in a conundrum where he can't be crowned king if he's going to be tried, persecuted, and killed. You can't do that. But he has to be king. So if I make it so he has no other option but to take the throne, then what bad is it? You see what I'm saying here? He sells Jesus out to try to get what Jesus already said is going to happen. I'm not approving it. Satan's just really clever. So he does. He agrees to betray him. And he doesn't do it immediately. He gives him time. He waits it out. He sees, well, maybe it'll happen tomorrow, you know? And then Jesus, at the Last Supper, tells Judas, you are going to betray me. Judas is probably thinking, well, I did this. Jesus already knows about it. And since Jesus already knows about it, it's got to be okay. That's my understanding, is that Jesus already knows about it, so it can't be that bad. If Jesus knew about it, he would tell me, no, don't do it, or chastise me, but he's got to be okay with it. I've got to be doing the right thing. Maybe I'm the one that's supposed to be making Jesus king. So then the Garden of Gethsemane comes. Judas betrays Jesus with a kiss. And then Peter's there, the guards come, and Peter's thinking the same thing. Peter, the apostle that we love to love, he's thinking the same thing. He's thinking, they're coming. You know what this means? This means the legion of angels are coming, and we're taking the throne tonight. He pulls out his sword. He's ready for action. He's ready for battle. He's ready for glory. And Jesus tells him, no. Put your sword away, Peter. That's not what my kingdom's about. And it's at this moment where Judas realizes it didn't work out for him. That moment of clarity that comes after a sin, or after that moment where you do something incredibly wrong, and immediately you realize, oh no, shoot. And Judas, he realizes he just sold out the Messiah, the one that he knew was to be prophet, priest, and king, and to restore Israel. He just sold him out for chump change. So he goes back. He tries to give away the money. It was never about the money. He says, I don't even want it now. This was never about this. And I want a refund. I didn't get what I wanted. And they don't give him the money back. And we know he goes, buys a field, and he hangs himself. And we can look at that suicide as just filled with grief over having betrayed his friend of 3 years and the coming king of Israel. But this is Roman culture. In Roman culture, there's an honor and shame system. And much like what we saw with the Japanese, suicide was a way to restore honor. So Judas goes and he buys a field. He doesn't just find a random field and then hang a rope up. No, he buys a field. He doesn't want to be an inconvenience to anybody. He wants to be able to do this on his own terms. This is a mission. He buys the field and he hangs himself. Deuteronomy has a law that says that a body cannot hang on a tree for more than a day. Cursed is the man that hangs from a tree. We read that, we think about Jesus, but Judas would have known that passage also. He bought a tree. He bought a field. He bought a tree. And he hung himself to try to restore whatever honor that he could, to try to make up for the shame that he brought onto himself. And we can't help, we shouldn't help, but to feel sorry for Judas. The natural reaction is, no, he shouldn't. He betrayed Jesus. He sinned, big time. Jesus even said so. And yes, he did, but Judas died never knowing Jesus. Judas spent 3 years knowing Jesus, but the Jesus he knew was only a partial truth. He died really thinking that he knew Jesus, and that in his sin he saw no thing that can restore him. He died without the love of Christ, believing in some half Messiah, and a king that would rule one day and gone the next. He died never knowing the forgiveness of Christ. And that's the biggest tragedy. And it almost makes you wonder, what would have happened if Judas survived? What would have happened if Judas didn't kill himself? What if he did get to see Jesus after the resurrection? What would have happened? And the best way to possibly be able to answer that question is to look at Peter, the one that we like to think is the opposite of Judas. Well, let's go back to the Garden of Gethsemane. The guards come to arrest Jesus. And Peter, again, he's thinking, this is it. The king is coming. Everything I've been waiting for, 3 years of being this close to Jesus, we're finally going to the kingdom. And Jesus tells him, no, put away your sword. That's not what I'm about. That's not what my kingdom's about. And Peter's left thinking, but you're the Messiah. You're the king. I even said so. And you're not taking the throne? You're the one that was foretold in the Old Testament, but you're not going to do what you were supposed to do? I spent 3 years believing that you were this great thing, and now you're just going to go? The man that's in front of me now is not the man that I spent 3 years with. The Jesus that he now knew is not the Jesus that he pointed to and said, you're the Messiah. And then the trials of Jesus come. And Peter's there. And people ask him, don't you know this man? And Peter says, no. I don't know that man. Whatever I thought that man was, it's not him. I don't know him. And it happens again. Don't you know this man? He says, no, I don't. No, and with increased fervor. And again, don't you know this man? And he says, no, I don't. Whatever I spent 3 years with, the one that I thought was my friend, the one that I thought was the Messiah, the King, is not that man. And then the rooster crows, and Peter remembers that Jesus knew even this was going to happen. Peter realized that Jesus knew that who was arguably his closest friend was going to later say, I don't even know you. whoever you were, whoever I became friends with, whoever I followed for 3 years is a lie. In one sense, there, Peter betrayed Jesus. But Peter doesn't kill himself. He lives. And then Christ comes back in something nobody saw coming. And at the beach, at the Sea of Galilee, Jesus restores Peter. He says, feed my sheep. Feed my lambs. Feed my sheep. He restored him. He said, even though you betrayed me, even though you settled for a half-truth on who I am, I forgive you. And I can restore you, and I can build you up to so much more than you already are. And then Peter goes on to be one of the founders of this. We're so opposed to Judas. We're so opposed to his sin. We love to point out his sin. That we never stop to think that this is a man that died never knowing the forgiving power of Christ. A man that never knew just the power of the resurrection. It's a man who settled on a half-truth and lived and operated with a half-truth, a half-understanding of who Jesus was. But we don't see that. What we see is the sin. And we condemn it. Hopefully by now you see that this process, this description doesn't just apply to Judas. It's our neighbors, our friends, our family. It's the people that we see on the TV, the one we hear about in the news. And we look at their sin and we say, you're going to hell. Your sin is destroying you. When the thought should be sorrow. That people live without knowing Jesus, without knowing the healing and the forgiving power of Christ. We somehow get caught up in condemning. That we forget that it's not even our job. It's not even our right to condemn. I want to leave just with this thought. Don't condemn greater than God forgives.